Iran hasn't launched a full-scale military assault on Israel. They haven't sent troops across borders. They haven't dropped nuclear weapons. They haven't even attempted a direct invasion, yet they're systematically destroying Israel. And it's working. What I'm about to reveal is the most sophisticated strategy of asymmetric warfare in modern history. A blueprint for defeating a militarily superior adversary without direct confrontation. While the world watches for missiles and military strikes, Iran is executing a long-term campaign that's collapsing Israel economically, socially, and psychologically. This isn't speculation. This is strategic reality unfolding in real time. And by the time Israel realizes what's happening, it may be too late to stop it. Let me start with what most people think they know. Iran and Israel are enemies. Iran supports groups that attack Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, various militias in Syria and Iraq, everyone knows this. But most people see these as isolated incidents, random attacks, terrorism without strategy. They're wrong. What Iran has built is a strategic network of proxy forces that can apply continuous, calibrated pressure on Israel from multiple directions simultaneously. This isn't terrorism. This is coordinated military strategy executed through non-state actors. Think of it like this. Israel has the most advanced military in the Middle East, sophisticated air force, nuclear weapons, Iron Dome missile defense, Mossad intelligence, elite special forces. In a direct conventional war, Israel would destroy Iran. The military imbalance is overwhelming. Iran knows this, so they're not fighting a conventional war. They're fighting a war of attrition, a war of economic exhaustion, a war designed to make Israel unsustainable rather than conquerable. Here's how the strategy works. Yemen, Houthi rebels, armed and trained by Iran, launch missiles and drones toward Israel. Most get intercepted. Some get through. The attacks accomplish two things. First, they force Israel to expend Iron Dome interceptors. Each interceptor costs between $40,000 and $100,000. Every Houthi missile or drone costs maybe $2,000 to produce. The economic mathematics favor Iran dramatically. Israel must intercept everything because they can't know which threats are real and which are decoys, so they spend millions intercepting cheap drones. Second, the attacks create psychological pressure. Air raid sirens, shelters, disrupted daily life. Economic activity slows. Tourism declines. Israelis start questioning whether constant war is sustainable. Lebanon. Hezbollah, the most capable of Iran's proxies, maintains an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles. They don't use them all at once. Instead, they conduct calibrated strikes that keep northern Israel in a state of perpetual tension. Israeli communities near the Lebanese border have been largely evacuated. Farmers can't work their fields. Businesses have closed. Entire towns are empty. This isn't military defeat. It's territorial denial achieved through the threat of violence rather than actual conquest. Syria. Iranian-backed militias operate across Syria, occasionally striking Israeli targets. More importantly, they establish positions that could threaten Israel in a larger conflict. Israel conducts airstrikes in Syria regularly, trying to prevent Iranian entrenchment. But here's the key. Every airstrike Israel conducts has costs. Aircraft maintenance, munitions, pilot hours, intelligence resources. Iran forces Israel to expend resources continuously just to prevent worse threats from emerging. Iraq. Shia militias aligned with Iran occasionally launch attacks toward Israel or U.S. bases supporting Israel. Again, most get intercepted, but the pattern is important. Israel faces potential threats from Yemen to the south, Lebanon to the north, Syria to the northeast, and Iraq to the east. 4 fronts, continuous pressure, no rest. This is the essence of Iran's strategy. Distributed, persistent pressure from multiple vectors that forces Israel to maintain maximum defensive readiness constantly. Now let me show you the economic warfare component. Tourism is crucial to Israel's economy. Before October 2023, Israel received approximately 4 million tourists annually, generating over $8 billion in revenue. By mid-2024, tourism had collapsed by over 60%. Hotels stood empty. Airlines canceled routes. Tour operators went bankrupt. This isn't because of actual destruction. Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are physically intact. But tourists don't visit war zones. Even the perception of danger kills tourism. Iran's strategy creates that perception without actually conquering territory. Foreign investment has similarly declined. Major tech companies have relocated staff. Venture capital funding for Israeli startups dropped. International corporations are reconsidering their Israeli operations. Again, this isn't because of physical destruction. It's because sustained conflict creates uncertainty, and capital hates uncertainty. The Israeli shekel has weakened significantly. Inflation has accelerated. The cost of living crisis that already existed before October 2023 has intensified. Israel's credit rating has been downgraded by major agencies, not because of debt levels, but because of political instability and security concerns. Every one of these economic indicators reflects Iran's strategy working. Israel isn't being conquered. It's being made economically unsustainable, but the military costs are even more revealing. Israel called up over 300,000 reservists in October 2023. That's nearly 3% of the entire population mobilized for military service. These aren't professional soldiers. These are civilians with jobs, businesses, families. When they're called to military service, the economy loses their productivity. Small businesses close because owners are deployed. Tech companies lose engineers to reserve duty. Construction projects halt because workers are in uniform. The economic cost of mass mobilization isn't measured in military spending alone. It's measured in lost economic output across the entire society. And here's the cruel mathematics. Israel must maintain this mobilization indefinitely because the threat is continuous. Demobilize and Iran's proxies could strike. Stay mobilized and the economy deteriorates. Iran has created a trap with no good exit. The Iron Dome system, celebrated as Israel's ultimate defense, has become an economic burden. During intense periods of conflict, Israel fires hundreds of interceptors daily. Each major escalation costs Israel hundreds of millions in ammunition alone. This doesn't include the cost of maintaining the system, training operators, or replacing aging equipment. Meanwhile, Iran's proxies can produce cheap rockets and drones continuously. The cost-exchange ratio favors the attacker dramatically. Military experts call this economic asymmetry. The defender must spend vastly more than the attacker to maintain security. Over time, this imbalance becomes unsustainable. Now let's talk about the demographic weapon. Israel faces a brain drain problem that's accelerating. High-skilled workers, particularly in the tech sector, are leaving. Not in massive numbers yet, but the trend is clear. Engineers, doctors, entrepreneurs, the people who drive Israel's knowledge economy, are obtaining second passports and relocating families abroad. Why? Because they're looking at their children's future and asking, will this conflict ever end? When your kids grow up with bomb shelters and air raid sirens as normal life, when military service means potential combat rather than a coming-of-age experience, when the economic prospects are uncertain because of perpetual war, the calculation changes. Israel's greatest strength has always been human capital. The brain drain threatens this foundation, and here's what makes this particularly insidious. Iran doesn't need to encourage this. They just need to maintain pressure long enough that Israelis make the rational individual choice to leave. Collective strength erodes through individual decisions for family safety and economic security. Meanwhile, Iran's population is 88 million versus Israel's 9 million. The demographic mathematics favor sustained conflict for Iran. They can absorb losses that would be catastrophic for Israel. This is another dimension of asymmetry. Israel must protect every life because their population is small. Iran can accept casualties in proxy forces because they're not Iranian citizens. The reserve military system is breaking. Israel's military model depends on a large reserve force of trained civilians who can be mobilized quickly. This system worked when wars were short and infrequent, but prolonged conflict destroys this model. Reservists can't maintain civilian careers if they're repeatedly called up for extended periods. Employers become reluctant to hire people who might disappear for months at a time. Self-employed professionals lose clients. Families face financial stress. The social contract of reserve service, we serve then return to normal life, breaks down when normal life never returns. Reports from inside the IDF indicate rising refusal rates among reservists. Not political protest, but economic necessity. I can't afford another 3 months of reserve duty. My business will collapse. This erosion of the reserve system is strategically significant. If Israel can't mobilize reserves effectively, they must either maintain a larger standing army, economically prohibitive, or accept reduced military capability. Either way, Iran wins. Let me show you the psychological warfare dimension. October 7th, 2023 wasn't just a military attack. It was a demonstration that Israel's vaunted intelligence and security apparatus could fail catastrophically. For decades, Israelis believed they were protected by the best intelligence service in the world, by technological superiority, by military dominance. October 7th shattered that confidence. If Hamas could penetrate Israeli defenses and carry out such an attack, what else might be possible? This loss of confidence is strategic gold for Iran, because confidence is the foundation of deterrence. Israel's security model has always relied on deterrence, the belief among enemies that attacking Israel would result in devastating retaliation. When that deterrence is questioned, Israel must prove it through actual military action, which is exactly what Iran wants. Every Israeli military operation in Gaza, Lebanon, or Syria costs money, consumes ammunition, creates casualties, and generates international criticism. Iran forces Israel to choose between demonstrating strength through military action, which depletes resources, or showing restraint, which encourages further attacks. Either choice serves Iranian strategic interests. The psychological impact on Israeli society is measurable. Protests against the government, declining confidence in leadership, social divisions becoming more acute. 500,000 Israelis protesting in the streets isn't just political opposition, it's evidence of social fracture under stress. Iran doesn't need to create these divisions. They just need to apply enough pressure that existing fault lines crack open. Now let's talk about the international dimension. Iran has successfully positioned itself as resisting Israeli occupation, while Israel appears as an aggressor, conducting military operations in multiple countries. This narrative shift is strategically significant. Israel used to enjoy broad international sympathy as a small democracy surrounded by hostile neighbors. That narrative has eroded. Now, significant portions of international opinion view Israel as a regional bully using disproportionate force. This matters because Israel depends on international support, particularly from the United States. As American public opinion shifts, particularly among younger voters, political support for unconditional backing of Israel weakens. Iran doesn't need to defeat Israel militarily if they can isolate Israel diplomatically. Every civilian casualty in Gaza or Lebanon, regardless of the military context, feeds the narrative of Israeli aggression. Iran's proxies operate from civilian areas precisely because Israeli retaliation will create casualties that damage Israel's international standing. This is another form of asymmetric warfare. Hamas and Hezbollah don't need to follow laws of war because they're not recognized states. Israel must follow international law or face consequences. The playing field is tilted, and Iran knows how to exploit this. The International Criminal Court investigating Israeli officials, the International Court of Justice hearing genocide cases, the UN Security Council resolutions, these don't militarily defeat Israel, but they contribute to isolation. Isolated countries face sanctions, reduced trade, limited diplomatic options. Economic and strategic costs mount even without military defeat. Let me show you the nuclear dimension. Iran's nuclear program isn't just about building a bomb. It's about creating a strategic dilemma for Israel. If Iran gets nuclear weapons, Israel's conventional military superiority becomes less relevant. You can't airstrike a nuclear-armed opponent without risking nuclear retaliation, but preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons requires Israeli action that becomes increasingly costly and risky. Israel conducted successful strikes against Iraqi and Syrian nuclear facilities in the past, but Iran has learned. Their facilities are hardened, buried deep underground, distributed across multiple sites. Attacking Iran's nuclear infrastructure would require a massive military operation with uncertain chances of success. It would likely trigger regional war. It might not actually stop the nuclear program permanently. So Israel faces an impossible choice. Accept a nuclear-armed Iran, unacceptable. Attack and risk catastrophic escalation, potentially fatal, or pressure the international community to stop Iran, which hasn't worked. This strategic dilemma is itself a victory for Iran. They force Israel to expend diplomatic capital, military planning, and psychological energy on a problem with no good solution. Every year Iran gets closer to nuclear capability is a year of increasing Israeli anxiety and strategic paralysis. Even if Iran never actually builds a bomb, the threat of them doing so serves Iranian interests by constraining Israeli options. Here's what the next 24 months look like if current trends continue. Israel's economy continues deteriorating. Not collapse, but sustained decline. Growth stagnates. Investment falls. Brain drain accelerates. The fiscal deficit widens as military spending increases while tax revenues decline. Military readiness decreases as reserve system stress intensifies. Israel must choose between maintaining large-scale mobilization, economic suicide, or demobilizing security risk. Social cohesion fragments further. The ultra-Orthodox exemption from military service becomes politically explosive as secular Israelis bear disproportionate burden. Protests intensify, political instability increases, American support becomes more conditional. The US continues providing weapons, but with increasing restrictions on their use. American political leaders face domestic pressure to reduce involvement in endless Middle East conflicts. Regional isolation deepens. Arab states that normalized relations with Israel under the Abraham Accords maintain formal ties but reduce practical cooperation. The promise of regional integration fades. Iran's nuclear program advances toward weaponization threshold. Israel's window for military action closes as the risks of attack become prohibitive. This is the trajectory, not inevitable but probable based on current dynamics. And here's the truly sophisticated part of Iran's strategy. They're not trying to destroy Israel next month or next year. They're trying to make Israel unsustainable over the next decade. This is strategic patience. This is playing the long game while your opponent is forced to focus on immediate threats. Every missile intercepted, every reservist called up, every entrepreneur who leaves, every $1 billion spent on defense rather than development. These are small degradations that compound over time. Israel might win every individual engagement, intercept every missile, kill every terrorist, conduct every airstrike successfully, and still lose strategically because the cumulative costs become unbearable. This is how you defeat a militarily superior opponent. You don't beat them in battle. You make sustained conflict so costly that they eventually choose to leave or accept terms they would never have accepted at the beginning. Iran watched America in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. They learned the lesson. Military superiority doesn't guarantee strategic victory. Political will, economic sustainability, and social cohesion matter more than firepower. They're applying that lesson against Israel. Let me address the obvious question. Can Israel stop this? Theoretically, yes, but the options are all extremely costly. Option 1, decisive military action to eliminate Iran's nuclear program and destroy their proxy networks. This would require attacking targets across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and potentially Iran itself. The military operation would be massive, the casualties high, the international condemnation severe, the risk of wider regional war enormous. Even if successful tactically, it wouldn't solve the underlying problem. Iran would rebuild, new proxies would emerge, and Israel would have expended enormous resources for temporary relief. Option 2, diplomatic resolution. Negotiate with Iran through intermediaries. Accept some version of regional détente. This would require Israeli concessions that current political leadership considers unacceptable. It would mean accepting Iranian influence in Lebanon and Syria. It might mean concessions on the Palestinian issue. Politically, this is almost impossible for Israeli leadership to pursue without being accused of surrender. Option 3, maintain current posture indefinitely. Continue intercepting missiles, conducting targeted strikes, managing conflicts on multiple fronts. This is the current approach. And it's slowly losing because the economic and social costs are unsustainable long term. Option 4, escalate to the point that America intervenes directly against Iran. Some Israeli strategic thinkers advocate for triggering American military action that would eliminate the Iranian threat. But American appetite for Middle East wars is at historic lows. Even a direct Iranian attack on Israel might not provoke full American military intervention, and trying to manipulate America into war risks alienating Israel's most important ally. None of these options are good. That's the definition of a strategic trap. Here's what keeps me awake at night about this situation. The trajectory is toward a regional war that nobody wants, but nobody can prevent. Israel can't accept current situation indefinitely. Iran can't stop applying pressure without appearing weak. America doesn't want to fight, but can't completely abandon Israel. Arab states want stability, but can't ignore Palestinian issue. Every actor is rational, every actor is pursuing their interests logically, and yet the system dynamics are pushing toward catastrophic escalation. This is how great power conflicts begin, not through anyone's desire for war, but through strategic logic that leaves no acceptable exit. If Israel concludes that current trajectory is unsustainable, they might launch preventive war against Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran would retaliate with everything they have. Hezbollah would launch its entire arsenal. The Persian Gulf could become a war zone. Oil prices would skyrocket. Global economy would crash. Humanitarian catastrophe would unfold. Nobody wants this. But the alternative, accepting slow strategic defeat, is also unacceptable to Israeli leadership. This is the box that Iran has built, and Israel is running out of time to escape it. Let me end with this observation. Iran hasn't fired a shot directly at Israel in this invisible war, but they're winning. They've created an economic trap, a military dilemma, a demographic challenge, and a psychological burden that Israel cannot sustain indefinitely. The genius of this strategy is that it exploits Israel's strengths against itself. Israel's advanced military requires expensive maintenance and constant readiness. Iran forces them to maintain it at maximum capacity indefinitely. Israel's small population makes every casualty politically significant. Iran operates through proxies whose casualties don't affect Iranian politics. Israel's democracy makes it vulnerable to internal division and protest. Iran's authoritarian system faces no such constraint. Israel's international position requires maintaining moral high ground. Iran's proxies operate from civilian areas, ensuring any Israeli response generates criticism. Every Israeli strength becomes a vulnerability when properly exploited. This is strategic brilliance. This is how you fight when you can't win militarily. And unless something changes dramatically, it's working. The question isn't whether Iran can destroy Israel militarily. They can't. The question is whether they can make Israel unsustainable economically, socially, and psychologically. And based on current trajectories, the answer might be yes. That's the invisible war. The war without armies clashing. The war where victory looks like your opponent slowly collapsing under pressure. You apply from every direction simultaneously. Iran isn't trying to conquer Israel. They're trying to make Israel collapse from within. And they might be succeeding